Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to World Health News. This is your host, Dr. Yavuz Selim Salay, physician, entrepreneur, and venture architect. I'm thrilled about the news and sharing the most authentic news all around the world. Our first news is about, as you all know, the coronavirus. And in terms of coronavirus, a very interesting point has been raised. Health official warns against taking ibuprofen and cortisone, as it may actually worsen the bug. Our second news is about a study which provides better understanding of relationship between hearing loss and risk for falls. Our third news is about air pollution. Air pollution exposure takes a heavy toll on gut bacteria, boosting risk of chronic illnesses. Our fourth news is about people in rural Honduras embrace multiphasic cancer screening opportunities. And our final news is about heavy stress and lifestyle can predict life expectancy. So let's get back to our first news on coronavirus. One of the French health officials warns against taking ibuprofen and cortisone, as it may actually worsen the bug. This French health minister, Olivier Véran, who is a qualified doctor and neurologist, has issued a warning about taking drugs such as ibuprofen and cortisone to tackle coronavirus, and instead recommends using paracetamol. So the French government has issued a warning that over-the-counter anti-inflammatory drugs may make the coronavirus worse. Olivier Véran, a qualified doctor and neurologist who is also the nation's health minister, tweeted on Saturday, the taking of anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, cortisone, could be a factor in aggravating the infection. In case of fever, please take paracetamol. If you are already taking anti-inflammatory drugs, ask your doctor's advice. According to health officials, anti-inflammatory drugs are a known risk for people with infectious illnesses because they can decrease the response of the body's immune system, The Guardian reports. They are recommending that people should take paracetamol instead because it will reduce the fever without counterattacking the inflammation. Since January, all French residents must seek advice from a pharmacist if they want to buy popular painkillers such as ibuprofen, paracetamol, and aspirin. So make sure to focus on paracetamol if you have fever, ladies and gentlemen, and make sure to go to your doctor and get their recommendation. Our second news is about a study, a very interesting study, providing better understanding of relationship between hearing loss and risk for falls. What people hear and do not hear can have a direct effect on their balance, according to a new research from the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary of Mount Sinai. The research published in the March 12th of JAMA, Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery, provides a better understanding of the relationship between hearing loss and why people fall, especially in the elderly population. The findings could lead doctors to screen for hearing loss in patients at high risk for falls, detect hearing loss in its early stages, and treat it quickly. Falls are the leading cause of deadly injuries in the United States. So prior studies have shown that hearing loss is an independent risk factor for falls, even for those who were not dizzy. However, the reason why has never been completely understood, although it is believed to be related to the inner ear. So this study, ladies and gentlemen, found that the sounds we hear affect our balance by giving us important information about the environment. We use sound information to keep ourselves balanced, especially in cases where other senses such as vision or proprioception are compromised, said a senior author Maura Cossetti, who is an associate professor of otolaryngology at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai and the director of the Ear Institute at NYEE. So balance, ladies and gentlemen, is complicated and involves the coordination of many different sensory inputs. When people fall, doctors typically focus on vision issues, check for neuropathy in their feet, and bone issues, and fully ignore issues related to hearing. So that's why I wanted to share this news, because this news is highlighting the importance of hearing for our sense of balance. And because hearing loss is treatable, getting hearing checked is a crucial first step. So in this study, ladies and gentlemen, a team of researchers from Mount Sinai and New York University's Steinhardt School of Culture conducted a comprehensive analysis of all published research since inception, PubMed, Cochrane database of Scopus, that investigated the association between sound and standing balance. They looked at 28 medical articles involving more than 700 patients. Many of the studies focused on fields that clinicians who treat falls would not typically encounter, such as sound, engineering, computer science, physics, and psychology. The authors combined all of the studies and looked for trends in the data. The studies analyzed mostly healthy adults, but also looked at patients with congenital blindness, vestibular loss, so damage to the inner ear causing balance and eye issues, including vertigo, and different levels of hearing loss. All research examined how sounds affected someone's ability to keep their balance while standing still, often with their eyes closed and when standing on a pliable, squishy surface. They also looked at how wearing noise-canceling headphones, a complete lack of sound, affected balance. Some studies played white noise or static, while others used environmental sounds such as cocktail party chatter or running water. They found that people had more difficulty staying balanced or standing still on an uneven surface when it was quiet, but had better balance while listening to sounds. The author found that the type of sound was important when it comes to balance. More specifically, continuous background noise, usually static, was the most helpful for subjects to keep their center of gravity. Some types of sounds actually cause poor balance. For example, some people who listen to sound jumping back and forth through headphones, beeping that went from left to right, had difficulty standing upright. The authors believe that this may be because sound can act as an auditory anchor. More specifically, people use sounds like white noise to help unconsciously create a mental image of the environment to keep ourselves grounded. So this research is very interesting, and this research analysis showed that sound became more important for the balance when the subjects were given difficult balancing tasks, standing on a moving floor, or if the patients had pre-existing sensory issues. When people with vision loss, hearing loss, or balance problems heard stationary sounds, their posture dramatically improved. This suggests people rely more and more on hearing when other senses are impaired. This research suggests that sounds can have a stabilizing effect on balance and may be acting as an anchor that patients can lean on when other senses are less reliable, and also shows that being unable to hear sounds resulted in poorer balance. Ultimately, an inability to hear puts patients at higher risk for instability and falls. Elderly patients have a number of factors that put them at greater risk of falling, and hearing loss is a significant and under-recognized contributor. Age-related hearing loss is prevalent, affecting up to 2/3 of those over the age of 70, and should be considered and checked in those at high risk for falls. Future research will confirm whether treating that hearing loss with hearing aids or other implants will also serve as a type of balance aid like a cane, giving access to important information that could be used to improve balance and decrease fall risk. Maura Cosetti, the Associate Professor of Otolaryngology at the Icahn School of Medicine and Mount Sinai and Director of the Institute and NYEE, said that the analysis highlighted large gaps in research on hearing loss and balance. Future studies are needed that look at different levels of hearing loss and how hearing aids and cochlear implants affect balance. The researchers added that more studies using everyday sounds like traffic or shopping malls or airports are necessary to understand more about fall risks in people with hearing loss. Also, more studies focused on older adults need to be conducted. I want to thank Mount Sinai Health System as a source. Thank you very much. Our next news is about air pollution, ladies and gentlemen. We all know that air pollution exposure can actually take a heavy toll on many things. But do you know that air pollution exposure takes a heavy toll on your gut bacteria, boosting risk of chronic illnesses? So breathing dirty air takes a heavy toll on your gut bacteria, boosting risk of obesity, diabetes, gastrointestinal disorders, and other chronic illnesses. This new University of Colorado Boulder research suggests. The study published online in the journal Environmental International is the first to link air pollution to changes in the structure and function of the human gut microbiome, the collection of trillions of microorganisms residing within us. So the gaseous, pollutant ozone, which helps make up Denver's infamous brown cloud, is particularly hazardous. The study found that with young adults exposed to higher levels of ozone, showing less microbial diversity and more of certain species associated with obesity and disease. We know from previous research that air pollutants can have a whole host of adverse health effects, said senior author Tanya Alderet, an assistant professor of integrative physiology, pointing to studies linking smog with type 2 diabetes, weight gain, and inflammatory bowel diseases. The takeaway from this paper is that some of those effects might be due to changes in the gut. So, ladies and gentlemen, this study comes at a time when air quality globally, in China, in Africa, in United States, in Europe, is worsening after decades of improvement. In December, the Environmental Protection Agency downgraded, for example, in the United States, the Denver Metro and North Front Range regions to serious non-attainment status for failing to meet national ozone standards. So regions of 8 other states, including some in California, Texas, Illinois, Connecticut, Indiana, New Jersey, New York, and Wisconsin were also penalized for high ozone. So worldwide, according to research published this month, air pollution kills 8.8 million people annually, more than smoking or war. So while much attention has been paid to respiratory health, Alderet's previous studies have shown pollution can also impair the body's ability to regulate blood sugar and influence risk for obesity. Other research has shown visits to emergency rooms for gastrointestinal problems spike on high pollution days, and youth with high exposure to traffic exhaust have greater risk of developing Crohn's disease. So, to investigate just what might be going on inside the gut, Alderet's team used cutting-edge whole genome sequencing to analyze fecal samples from 101 young adults in Southern California. The researchers looked at data from air monitoring stations near the subjects' addresses to calculate their previous year exposure to ozone, which forms when emissions from vehicles are exposed to sunlight. Particulate matter, like hazardous particles suspended in the air, and nitrous oxide, a toxic byproduct of burning fossil fuel. Of all the pollutants, ladies and gentlemen, measured, ozone had the greatest impact on the gut by far, accounting for about 11% of the variation seen between study subjects, more of an impact than gender, ethnicity, or even diet. Those with higher exposure to ozone also had less variety of bacteria living in their gut. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen, since lower bacteria diversity has been linked with obesity and type 2 diabetes. So, Tanya Alderet, kudos to Tanya, the senior author, in all the researchers identified 128 bacterial species influenced by increased ozone exposure. Some may impact the release of insulin, the hormone responsible for ushering sugar into the muscle for energy. Other species can produce metabolites, including fatty acids, which help maintain gut barrier integrity and ward off inflammation. Ozone is likely changing the environment of your gut to favor some bacteria over others, and that can have health consequences. So this study was relatively small, but it was striking. That's why I wanted to share with my viewers, and has some limitations, including the fact that stool samples were taken only once. But Alderet is now moving ahead with a larger, more expensive study of the young adults in the Denver area, thanks to a new grant from the nonprofit Health Effects Institute. She is also exploring how prenatal or early life exposure to air pollution impacts the formation of the gut microbiome in 240 infants. She said she hopes her work will ultimately influence policymakers to consider moving parks, playgrounds, and housing developments away from busy roads and high pollution areas, and invest more in meeting or exceeding air quality standards. A lot of work still needs to be done, but this adds to a growing body of literature showing that human exposure to air pollution can have lasting, harmful effects on human health. Thank you very much to University of Colorado Boulder to provide this as a source. Ladies and gentlemen, our fourth news is about the people in rural Honduras embraced multiphasic cancer screening opportunities. As you all know, the burden of cancer is on the rise in low and middle income countries, such as Honduras. Few people in rural Honduras have access to cancer screening of any kind. A research team comprised of Honduran oncologists and scientists from Dartmouth and Dartmouth Hitchcock's Norris Cullen Center wanted to test a new model of multi-phasic cancer screening event that offered testing for multiple types of cancer in a single screening experience. The team chose a rural area in mountainous Honduras and engaged local community leaders in identifying potential barriers to participation. Together, they developed simple strategies to mitigate the barriers and potentially maximize the participation. Each of the 3 screening events attracted more than 30 people, different rural communities. And over the 3 events from 30 different rural communities, 1,175 participants were screened and 190 received recommendations for follow-up testing within the Urban Cancer Center. Of those 190, 88% of them adhered to the recommendation and sought follow-up care. And even though there is a recognized men's health gap worldwide, particularly in LMICs, the local community asked to screen men while at the same time counseling that the men might not attend. Actually, they did participate, and it was gratifying to see that almost all who were identified as at risk complied with referral for clinical follow-up. So Kathleen Lyons, a senior scientist at the international research team called CLARO, which stands for Community-Led Action Research in Oncology, is actively engaging community leaders to identify local Honduran priorities and challenges in oncology. So CLARO generates new knowledge to devise cancer prevention strategies that could be deployed in any rural setting around the world. For example, they scheduled the screening events on weekend days, close to home, arranged transportation, fed participants a hot meal, and used local champions to issue personal invitations, says Lyons. At each event, participants were screened for 2 to 5 different types of cancer to maximize what could be their only screening opportunity ever. So CLARO's findings, feasibility of brigade-style multiphasic cancer screening in rural Honduras, are newly published in ASCO's Journal of Clinical Oncology, Global Oncology, under senior author, Honduran oncologist Suyapa Bejarano. So from the beginning, CLARO designed a screening approach that can be done anywhere that people can come together. Most of on-site volunteers were Honduran medical students, but similar medical students are available in every country. So involving them in cancer screening builds capacity long-term in their future medical practices, where they can utilize many of the techniques that they learn, notes Lyons. So the spaces the team used are also like those everywhere. Small, concrete schools with simple cubicles made by the men of the community. Headlamps eliminate the need for electricity, and their technique for tracking medical records on-site involves paper, pencil, and zip-top plastic bags. The team is developing a toolkit of their process that can guide other communities through the collaborative process of designing large-scale screening events that can be customized to meet individual community needs, including in Africa. Dartmouth's long-term partners in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, at the Ocean Road Cancer Institute are taking a different approach by screening at workplaces. They look forward to collaborating with them to build their knowledge of what works across multiple geographic and cultural differences, says Lyons. So curbing the rise of cancer in LMICs with prevention and early detection via community-based cancer screening is a strategy proven to be feasible to implement and welcomed by many people around the world. Congratulations to all that made this happen. Ladies and gentlemen, my final news is about heavy stress and lifestyle. Heavy stress and lifestyle can predict life expectancy. So life expectancy, which means how long you're going to live, is influenced not only by the traditional lifestyle-related risk factors, but also by factors related to a person's quality of life, such as heavy stress. The biggest cause for shortened life expectancy for 30-year-old men are smoking and diabetes. Smoking takes 6.6 years and diabetes 6.5 years out of their life expectancy. Being under heavy stress shortens their life expectancy by almost 3 years. So these results are based on a study in which researchers from the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare calculated the effects of multiple risk factors, including lifestyle-related ones, to the life expectancy of man and woman. This study also revealed that a lack of exercise strongly reduced the life of expectancy of 30-year-old man by 2.5 years. On the other hand, things such as the consumption of plenty of fruits, and vegetables could increase life expectancy, eating fruit by 1.4 years and eating vegetables by almost 1 year. The same factors impacted the life expectancy of both men and women. For 30-year-old women, smoking shortened the life expectancy about 5.5 years, and diabetes about 5.3 years, and heavy stress by 2.3 years. So the effects to the life expectancy of older people were similar but smaller than in younger age groups. The golden middle seemed to have the most positive effect in some factors related to lifestyle. The experience of stress increased the life expectancy if the person felt amount of stress they had was approximately the same as what other people typically experienced. Having more or less stress than that, on the other hand, reduced their life expectancy. A new calculation, which I find very interesting. This new calculation method in use for a large group of risk factors for the first time. So this study, which I'm sharing with you, was based on data collected from men and women aged 25 to 74 in the Finnish National FinRisk study, which continued for 20 years from 1987 to 2007 through questionnaires and measurements. The rate of mortality was followed until the end of 2014. The researchers calculated the life expectancies by changing the values of each risk factor at a time and keeping the values of other factors constant. Only the BMI, blood pressure, and cholesterol levels were allowed to be changed when the values related to lifestyle factors were changed. Before, life expectancy has usually been assessed based on only a few socio-demographic background factor groups, such as age, sex, and education. In this study, we wanted to understand and assess the impact of several different factors to a person's life expectancy, so we could compare their effects. Tommy Harkanen, research manager, he actually looked into the differences between the life expectancies of men and women, largely due to risk factors that can be changed. What was interesting about the study was how small the difference in the life expectancy of 30-year man and woman was, based on the same risk factor values, only 1.6 years, according to the statistics from the Statistics Finland. The difference between the sexes has been over 5 years for all 30-year-olds, which comes down to women having healthier lifestyles than men, says research professor Seppo Koskinen. So in this study, ladies and gentlemen, the differences in the life expectancies of people with different levels of education were fairly small when the other risk factor values were the same. However, earlier studies have discovered large differences between the life expectancies of groups of people with different levels of education. So the lifestyle choices that increase mortality, such as smoking, heavy alcohol use, unhealthy diet, and lack of exercise, are most common in the population groups whose social position is the weakest. The life expectancy of the whole population could be improved significantly through helping men and people with a lower level of education, in particular, make better lifestyle choices. Ladies and gentlemen, this sums up our World Health News. I wish you a wonderful day. Always stay tuned with World Health News. Make sure to call our WhatsApp number. This is Yavuz Selim Sılay, wishing you a wonderful, healthy, and happy day. Take care and all the best. Bye.